Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reacting Reddit, where real humans react and respond to Reddit content. Today I picked the Ask Reddit question, people who have been in an earthquake, what was it like? And I picked this question because I live in Nicaragua. So basically it's like living in California. Actually, if you're anywhere near the Pacific Ocean, you probably are near earthquakes and volcanoes. So Nicaragua, for those of you who don't know, is north of Costa Rica and south of Honduras. There you go. You now know where Nicaragua is. And that whole region is filled with volcanoes. There's actually like more than 5 huge volcanoes in Nicaragua. And Nicaragua is the size of one state. So, yeah, like a state like Virginia. Not even a big state. It's nowhere near as big as Alaska. So there's a lot of volcanoes in a really little amount of space. And interestingly, the capital of Nicaragua was completely destroyed by earthquakes twice in this century. So a lot of Nicaragua's history is related to the fact that its capital was demolished by really big earthquakes. And to this day, it affected the construction of all the buildings. Because Managua, where I live in the city, is built to the side, basically. In the U.S., cities will often build up. There'll be a lot of skyscrapers and tall high-rises and that kind of stuff. But here in Managua, there's like maybe 4 high-rises in the entire city. Most of it is like concrete, cinder block construction, sheet metal houses, that kind of stuff. Just stretched really far out. Because basically once the earthquake happened, they had to build new houses really quickly for all the people who lost their houses, right? So basically the earthquakes caused the city to spread out a lot. And they caused the city to not really have defined, like there is a city center, a cultural center, but it contains like government buildings and official stuff that were destroyed by the earthquake. So you can't like go inside a lot of them, if that makes sense. And it's kind of there. They have this cathedral that's there, and the clock has not moved since the moment the earthquake struck. So the clock still shows the exact time of day that the earthquake hit, which was at like 2 a.m. or something. All right, let's see what the first reply is. This is by E5PG. If you're in Los Angeles right now, it felt like that. It was a bit of a shaking back and forth, and everyone looking at each other saying, "Are you feeling this right now?" Yeah, there's tons of earthquakes in Los Angeles. Basically, if you live in California, you feel earthquakes every year. And there's also earthquakes that are so small that you never notice them. And I've lived in Nicaragua for 3 years, and I've actually never noticed an earthquake. I've been in earthquakes where I kept sleeping and didn't wake up, so I have no memory. I didn't ever notice. And it's not like I woke up and was like, oh, whoa, stuff's all over the place. I've never been in an earthquake that was noticeable for me. But obviously, I live in an area where that's a big problem, and inevitably it will happen again at some point. So it's only a matter of time, so they say. Next reply. This is by Joe Miller, too. There was an earthquake here a few minutes ago, actually. The ground and everything not secured well shakes and vibrates. It's like being on a boat. Huh. That's a pretty decent description. So, I was in an earthquake. The most intense earthquake I was ever in was actually in the United States in Arlington. And I was on the 20th floor of a high-rise, which basically when you're in a really tall building, the quakes, the tremors get amplified. So you feel more the higher you are in a building because the building kind of rocks, right? It's scary. But I was used to living near a train, right? Context. I was building a closet with one of my coworkers in this random wealthy person's house, right? I don't remember what we were building, but I remember they had a lot of drawers. Like, I basically had no money when I lived in the US, but I had a job where I would go into really rich people's houses and build them like $10,000 to $60,000 closets, which is kind of obscene now because I live in Nicaragua, right? And Nicaragua doesn't have much material wealth. Absolutely not. And it's kind of obscene thinking that, wow, some of the clients I used to have, they dropped $60,000 on a closet, on a place to put their fucking shoes, right? Whereas $60,000 in Nicaragua is 5 years of supporting a family. So, like, they're getting to the point where it's like, dang, like, you could take 100th of a wealthy U.S. person's money and then go live a whole lifetime supporting a family in Nicaragua. Like, money goes so much further here. And you listening to this, you're probably all judgmental about it. Oh, yeah, it's all violent. There's gangs. There's drug problems. People die. You know, nobody lives in Latin America. Yeah, guys, there's millions of people living here, living, like, pretty regular lives. It's true. We don't have as much material stuff as people in the United States. That is true. But that doesn't mean that people in Nicaragua aren't people. It doesn't mean that you don't have poor people and wealthy people and people in between. It doesn't mean that you don't have a whole new young generation that was raised with the internet and everything. Like, a lot of people in the US just think that all of Latin America is just a bunch of, like, gang wars and violence and, like, everybody's just being killed. And it's like, you realize that there's no active war in Latin America, right? Like, compared to some other places, compared to Europe 50, 100 years ago? Like, I'm not saying there aren't problems. There absolutely are problems in Latin America. But as a person raised in the United States, you don't know shit about Latin America. I can tell you that from experience myself, being in the US, being raised there, having all of these preconceptions and all these judgments about what life in Latin America was actually like, and then going and actually living there myself for 3 years. I'm telling you, you're wrong. Your life would actually be better if you're a young person and you earn money from a computer. Your life will be exponentially better if you live in Latin America. And I know you're going to be like, no, that's not true. Yeah, look, you may think that, like, oh, money's hard to get and it kind of controls your life, and you may stress out about bills, you may worry about paying for your health insurance. You know, you could go to Nicaragua and break your leg and then they would fix it for free even though you're a foreigner. The US system is so shit. It really is. Like, I'm a bit biased. You know why? Because my father died. He couldn't get insurance because he had pre-existing condition. He died of lung cancer, right? Didn't have health insurance. My mother went $120,000 into debt, paying for my father's medical bills in the US. And guess what? He didn't even live. He still died. And then my mother had to work for 7 years to pay off that debt for something that didn't even save her husband. How is that? How would you like to lose the person you love most and be charged $120,000 for it? F that. Like, I know you guys living in the US, you have this picture of what it's like to live there, but it's so distorted. It really is. And until you start spending time in other countries, in India, in countries where Islam is common, in countries in Latin America, or further in South America, you don't know anything about the actual world. You can think that living in the US and watching all the media about what they're talking about and all these problems in other countries, you can think that you know what it's like to be a person in the rest of the world, but you don't. You have to actually visit these people. You have to get to know them. You have to make friends. You have to see what their lives are like. And you'd be surprised how similar it is to yours. True, there's less material, but people still feel judged. People still feel disrespected. People still feel all of that crap. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're all human. We're all in this together. And we shouldn't be living lives, particularly in the US and other developed nations, that F over people in countries like Nicaragua. And I've seen that firsthand. I know how the things that you do in the United States hurt and affect the people here. And it's sad. And it wouldn't happen if people just were able to travel more. And I don't know how to make that happen, you know? How do you take people who've been in one country their entire lives and don't have that much money, how do you give them the experience of seeing the rest of the world In a real way, not in a, oh yeah, this is tourism. Everybody's happy in beach paradise. We just drink beer and go to the beach all the time. Like, you really think that tropical countries, that's just how everybody is in the whole country? Like, what about the people who are raised there? What about people who work? What about people who have jobs and shit? What do they do? Like, what do you think about all that stuff? You really think they're all just impoverished? You know? And you don't know what you're talking about until you go and experience it. So please, go and experience. Go to the lands of earthquakes. I'm telling you. It's going to be great, and you're probably not going to die in an earthquake. That being said, let's get to the last reply about this earthquake question. Wow, that was really... Sorry, I knew I had to embellish a bit there because those replies were really short. I picked a kind of a meatless topic here today. I'm sorry. So for this tool, you actually have to pick... you have to pick threads that have more than 100 comments, but it picks the longer but not too long comments. So sometimes there's not enough to actually read about. So yeah, nothing aside from me ranting at you about how life in earthquake-torn places can actually be pretty great if you earn money online. Like, what else can you tell me that you can do that's going to triple what you earn overnight? Yeah, I know that sounds fake. That can't be real, right? But it is. I'm telling you. If you don't have things tying you to the U.S., like you're younger, you don't have a family, and you work online or from a computer, you're wasting 2/3 of your money. And if the life in the US is worth that to you, okay, that's fine. You can choose to live in the US at 3 times the expense. Sure, if it's worth it. But I want you to understand that if you're a young person earning money online, you actually can just go live in a country like Nicaragua. You can get a fully furnished house for $300 a month in the city with similar access to goods that you're used to. The cost of living here is so low that you could spend 1 college degree and that money would live you and your family an entire life in Nicaragua. You only need $400 or $500 a month to live here. That's it. You know that rule of, oh yeah, you should earn, your rent should be 1/3 of what you earn per month or less. Well, yeah. What about if your rent's only $150 or $200? You really only need $600 to be safe by that rule. It's absurd, guys. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of things you think, a lot of preconceptions you have about the world. If you've never left the US, they're wrong. If you've never left the United States and seen what it's like in other countries, there's literally no way that you can actually know what the rest of the world really is like. You may think of all these people living in China and Islamic countries as foreigners, as people who aren't like you. But guess what? Guess what those children there are going through? Guess what the young people there are going through? It's almost identical, the same kind of stuff you're going through. You may think that all these places, they're all fucking war-torn and destroyed. And it is true, there are some places like that. Like, there are places that are really bad off right now. Like, you don't want to be in Syria at the moment. You don't. It's violent. There's a lot of death. There's bombing. It's intense, okay? But don't let that cloud your entire worldview. Don't let the fact that there is hardship in the world still make you ignorant to the fact that 100 years ago, there was so much more hardship. And 100 years before that, there was even more hardship. You now live in a time where you cannot complain. There is nothing that you can justify complaining about being a human born in this century. You can think that it's crappy, but that just shows you don't know anything about your own ancestors. You don't know what your parents and their parents struggled with. If you really believe that you have the right to complain and moan and bitch about how hard life is or how much of a struggle the world is or how depressing it is, open your eyes, learn some history. Seriously. We live in an amazing time. And if you don't think that, educate yourself. Research historical events over the past 100 years. Research how many people were dying to disease like tuberculosis, smallpox, all of these diseases. Do you have any idea how many humans were killed by these diseases in the past, 400 years? It's way more than war. There's so many diseases that you never had to experience because you had the luxury of being born after the 1950s. If you were born in 1920, you probably know somebody who died from tuberculosis as a 7-year-old. And that's just one disease, not even talking about polio. It was so normal to get sick to the point of death that less than 150 years ago, 1 in 3 children wouldn't make it past the age of 7. Can really complain about anything we have right now, knowing that you are alive in a time that by and by, for the most part, is easier for humans than it ever was before? Are you really gonna complain now? You live in a time where you have the opportunity to use the internet and change the quality of your life. And you may tell yourself, no, I can't do that. If you're listening to this, that's your responsibility. This is your life. You can bitch and moan and complain about things, but ultimately, that is you saying, I don't want to fix my problems. I don't want to have a better life. I want to live and be angry. I want to be cynical. I want to be depressed. I want to be miserable till the day I die, and then I want to regret everything I ever did. That's what you're saying when you complain. Maybe you think it's a stretch, but that's what I think. I saw my dad die. My mom got cancer. I got sick. I thought I was going to be sick for the rest of my life. And that's my mentality. If you don't fix your problems, no one else will. And if you don't believe you can fix your problems, you got to work on that. Because it doesn't, even if you have some crippling illness that you can't do anything about, humans are remarkable. And let me tell you something, we can get used to anything. And the reality is, once you lose something, it only sucks in the beginning. But eventually, you forget what it's like. I'll give you some personal experience from me. My dad died when I was 11, okay? Or 12. He got sick when I was 10. I watched him deteriorate to lung cancer and eventually die, being unable to speak by the time I was 12, okay? I could be angry about that. I could be frustrated. I could be like, oh, why'd I lose my dad, right? But you know what? Eventually, you forget what it's like to have a dad. And it doesn't matter anymore because you can complain about what happened to you or you can fix it. I was lonely. I felt like I didn't have supportive people in my life. So I worked on improving myself as much as possible and being as good to people as I possibly could so that I could attract people who care, who love me. And I can happily tell you now that I have a fully fledged support group where even if one friend disappeared off the face of the earth or died, I would have at least 1 or 2 other really close people who I can take care of and who take care of me. I have people who care about me. I am supported and I am loved, despite the fact that 8 years ago, I was completely alone. My father was dead. And I had a bad relationship at home. I felt completely alone. But time changes things. And don't let anything ever convince you that this life isn't worth living. No matter what happens to you, you can find a way to become stronger than it. No matter what you lose, no matter who dies, you are still alive. Your heart is beating. So stop complaining about things and live your life. Okay? All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Ciao.